Not a single person from my family showed up to my nursing pinning ceremony. My wife hosted a backyard barbecue with her sisters instead. As I stood on stage before the dean, fighting back tears, my phone buzzed with a text from my wife's mother, "Come home now," followed by 125 missed calls. I woke up at 5 in the morning with the kind of nervous energy that makes you check your phone 17 times before your feet even hit the floor. Today was it. The day I'd been fantasizing about since freshman year, when I thought memorizing the Krebs cycle was going to kill me faster than any actual disease. 4 years of nursing school at Johns Hopkins. 4 brutal, soul-crushing, coffee-fueled years were finally culminating in my pinning ceremony, and I was ready to walk across that stage like I'd just won an Olympic medal for surviving academic torture. I'd ironed my uniform the night before, then woke up paranoid at 3 a.m. thinking maybe I hadn't ironed it well enough, so I did it again. Twice. The thing was so crisp it could probably perform its own sterile procedure. I laid it out on the bed like it was a sacred artifact, which, honestly, after what I'd been through, it kind of was. This wasn't just fabric and a name tag. This was proof that I'd made it through pathophysiology without having a full mental breakdown in the library bathroom, which, for the record, almost happened in sophomore year during finals week. Mira had promised she'd be there. Not just promised. Sworn on our wedding photo, the one where we're both smiling like we actually believed marriage was going to be all romantic comedies and Sunday brunches. She said she'd bring the kids, her mom, her sisters, the whole squad. "We're all coming, babe," she'd said while scrolling through her phone 2 nights ago. Wouldn't miss it for the world. I should have known right then that wouldn't miss it for the world was code for I'm definitely going to find something else to do. But hindsight's 2020, and apparently so is stupidity. I made myself breakfast, scrambled eggs that I barely tasted because my stomach was doing backflips, and kept checking my phone for the inevitable good luck text or maybe even a sweet voice note from Mira saying how proud she was. Nothing. Radio silence. I told myself she was probably just busy getting the kids ready, making sure everyone looked presentable for the photos we'd definitely be taking later. I even imagined her arguing with her mom about what to wear, because that woman treats every public outing like it's the Met Gala. Around 7:30, I couldn't take the suspense anymore and opened Instagram, which was my first mistake of the day. Actually, scratch that. My first mistake was probably trusting that anyone in my wife's family understood the concept of priorities, but we'll get to that. I scrolled through my feed, past some inspirational quotes about perseverance that felt weirdly on brand for my morning, and then I saw it. A notification. Not from Mira. From her sister, Jessica, who has never met a moment she didn't want to broadcast to her 3,000 followers. The photo loaded, and I swear I felt my soul leave my body for a second. There they were, in all their filtered, Valencia-toned glory. Mira, her mom, and all three of her sisters gathered around a massive backyard grill that was pumping out enough smoke to signal passing aircraft. They were wearing matching aprons with little flames on them, because of course they were, and holding tongs like they were posing for some suburban lifestyle magazine. Behind them, strung between two trees, was a homemade banner that read, "Girls Who Grill," in glittery letters that probably cost more than my textbooks. I just stared at the screen, my coffee getting cold in my hand, thinking, yup, nothing says unconditional love and spousal support quite like ditching your husband's college graduation ceremony for hot dogs and Instagram content. The caption read, "Sunday fun day with my queens. Fire crown nothing beats family time and good vibes." The post already had 47 likes, and someone had commented, "Squad goals." I wanted to comment, "Abandonment goals," but I'm not that petty. Yet, I sat there for a solid 5 minutes, just staring at that photo, trying to process the sheer audacity. This wasn't some last-minute emergency or unexpected crisis. This was a planned event. They'd coordinated outfits. They'd made a banner. Someone had gone to the store and bought enough meat to feed a small militia. And not once, not during the shopping, the planning, or the goddamn banner making, did anyone think, hey, maybe we should check if Aaron has anything important happening today. You know, Aaron, the guy who's been studying his ass off for 4 years and is about to achieve something actually meaningful. But no, the grill won. The grill always wins in this family. I thought about calling Mira right then, but what was I going to say? "Hey honey, Just wondering why you're at a barbecue when you're supposed to be watching me receive the recognition I've been working towards since 2021. That would just start a fight, and I didn't have time for a fight. I had a ceremony to attend, alone, apparently, but still. So I did what any rational person would do. I put my phone on silent, finished getting dressed, and headed out the door with whatever dignity I had left, which wasn't much, but it was mine. The ceremony was at 10, held in the university's main auditorium, which was packed with families who actually showed up for their graduates. I found my assigned seat and sat down next to an empty chair that might as well have had a sign on it saying, "Reserved for people who care." Around me, everyone was taking photos, hugging, crying happy tears. One guy's entire extended family was there, including what looked like his 90-year-old grandmother who'd probably fought in a war and still made it to support him. Meanwhile, I was solo, trying to look like I'd intentionally come alone because I was independent and self-sufficient, not because my wife preferred propane and Instagram likes over me. The dean started calling names in alphabetical order, which meant I had to sit through about 40 other graduates walking across that stage with their proud families clapping and cheering. Each one felt like a tiny knife to the chest. Finally, I heard it. Mr. Aaron Blake, Bachelor of Nursing, Johns Hopkins University. I stood up, straightened my uniform one last time, and walked toward the stage with my head held high, even though inside I felt like I was walking through quicksand. As I climbed the steps, I heard some polite applause from strangers who probably felt bad for the guy, who clearly had nobody there. The dean shook my hand, smiled that professional smile she'd perfected over decades of academic ceremonies, and pinned the nursing pin to my uniform. It felt lighter than I'd expected, this tiny piece of metal that represented everything I'd sacrificed. I wanted to feel proud, triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Then again, and again. I couldn't check it until I got back to my seat, but I could feel it vibrating like it was having a seizure. When I finally pulled it out, my screen was lit up like a Christmas tree. A text from Myra's mother. "Come home now." Not "congratulations." Not "sorry we missed it." Just a command, like I was a dog who'd wandered too far from the yard. Then another message. Then another. I scrolled through my notifications. 125 missed calls. 125. I hadn't even received my official certificate yet, hadn't even processed what just happened, and somehow I was already in trouble. Somehow, on the day I finally achieved something I'd been working toward for 4 years, I was the bad guy. I sat there holding my phone, listening to the dean continue calling names, and I started laughing. Not a happy laugh. A laugh that comes from somewhere dark and resigned, the kind that makes people around you uncomfortable. The woman next to me looked concerned and whispered, "You okay, honey?" I nodded and lied. Yeah, just emotional. Because what was I supposed to say? My wife chose a barbecue over me, and now I'm apparently in the doghouse for graduating. Welcome to my life, where even your victories somehow become your fault. I drove home still wearing my uniform, the nursing pin sitting crooked on my chest, because the only person who'd hug me after the ceremony was the dean, and she'd accidentally knocked it sideways with her enthusiastic pat on the shoulder. She'd said, "Congratulations, Mr. Blake. You should be very proud," with genuine warmth in her eyes, probably because she could tell I was about 30 seconds away from having an existential crisis in the middle of the auditorium. I'd smiled, thanked her, and walked out of there with my diploma folder tucked under my arm, like it was a participation trophy from a sport I'd never wanted to play. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Traffic on I-95 was its usual nightmare, which gave me plenty of time to stew in my thoughts and imagine about 15 different conversations I could have with Mira. None of them ended well. Some ended with me calmly explaining how hurt I was. Others ended with me dramatically throwing the barbecue grill into the street while shouting something about priorities. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I'd mentally rehearsed so many scenarios that I felt like I'd already lived through the argument and lost every single version. The first thing I noticed was the noise. Our house, our supposedly peaceful suburban home where we'd raised 2 kids and planted a garden that never grew anything except disappointment, sounded like a county fair had exploded in the backyard. Music was blasting from the Bluetooth speaker I'd bought last Christmas, the one Mira had said we needed for family gatherings. Apparently, family gatherings was code for parties that exclude you. I could hear kids screaming in that specific frequency that makes your temples throb, and underneath it all was the unmistakable sound of adult laughter, the kind that comes after the third beer, when everyone's pretending life is just one big joke. I sat in my car for a minute, hands still on the steering wheel, and seriously considered just driving away. Maybe I could go to a Denny's, order some mediocre pancakes, and pretend I was celebrating my achievement like a normal person whose family actually gave a damn. But no, I'd come this far. I needed to see this train wreck up close. I walked through the front door and was immediately hit with the smell of charcoal, grilled meat, and betrayal. Okay, betrayal doesn't have a smell, but if it did, it would definitely smell like barbecue sauce mixed with broken promises. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. Empty chip bags on the couch, red Solo cups everywhere, and someone had left a half-eaten burger on top of the TV stand. Classy. I followed the chaos to the backyard, where I found the entire production in full swing. And when I say production, I mean it looked like they'd hired an event coordinator. There were balloons, actual balloon arches in teal and gold, string lights hanging from every available tree branch, and a folding table covered with enough food to feed a small wedding reception. My kids, Emma and Tyler, were running around with their cousins playing some game that involved shrieking at volumes that probably violated noise ordinances. Nobody noticed me standing there in my pristine white uniform, still holding my diploma folder like an idiot. Mira was stationed at the grill, wielding tongs with the confidence of someone who thought they were doing something important. She was wearing one of those girls who grill aprons from the Instagram post, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow still looked intentional. She was laughing at something her sister Jessica was saying, flipping burgers with the kind of focus I wish she'd apply to literally anything involving me. I stood there for a solid 30 seconds before she finally looked up and saw me. Her face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds: surprise, confusion, guilt, and then this weird attempt at casual that absolutely did not land. "Oh," she said, like I was the mailman dropping off a package and not her husband returning from his college graduation. Was that today? Was that today? 3 words that perfectly summarized our entire relationship. I could have written my thesis on those 3 words and probably gotten a doctorate in marital dysfunction. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice level even though I wanted to scream. "Just a small thing." 4 years of study, multiple mental breakdowns in the library, several caffeine overdoses that probably took years off my life, and that one-time sophomore year when I cried in my car after failing a pharmacology exam. Nothing major. She blinked at me, tongs still in hand, looking like she was trying to calculate whether she should apologize or double down on the denial. Before she could decide, her mother materialized out of nowhere like some kind of suburban who feeds on family drama. Patricia, or as I privately called her, the general, was wearing a matching apron and had that look on her face, the one that said she was about to make everything my fault somehow. "Aaron," she announced, as if my presence was both unexpected and slightly inconvenient. "You're finally here. Perfect timing. We need someone to take out the trash, and the grill's getting low on charcoal. Can you run to Home Depot? Oh, and bring the cooler from the garage. We're running out of ice." I just stared at her. This woman, who I'd known for 6 years, who'd been at our wedding and watched me struggle through nursing school while working part-time to support her daughter and grandkids, was assigning me chores at what was apparently my own surprise non-celebration party. "I just graduated," I said slowly, like maybe she'd forgotten basic comprehension skills. "From nursing school. Today. The ceremony you all missed because you were here having a barbecue." Patricia waved her hand dismissively, like I was bringing up something trivial like the weather. "Oh, honey, we can celebrate that anytime. Today's about family time. Now, about that trash, it's really piling up by the gate." I looked at Mira, waiting for her to jump in, to defend me, to say literally anything that acknowledged this was insane. She just looked uncomfortable and went back to flipping burgers, because apparently ground beef was more important than her husband's dignity. That's when Jessica piped up from her lawn chair, where she'd been documenting the entire party on Instagram stories. "Aaron, smile," she said, pointing her phone at me. "We're making memories." Memories. Right. The kind of memories you look back on and think, that was the day I realized my in-laws valued propane and photogenic moments over my actual accomplishments. I turned around and walked back through the house, past the mess, past the noise, past everything that was supposed to feel like home, but instead felt like a stage set for someone else's life. Behind me, I heard the general call out, "Aaron, where are you going? We need help out here." That was my reward for surviving nursing school. 4 years of sacrifice, student loans I'd be paying off until I retired, countless nights studying while my kids slept. Also, I could become the barbecue assistant at my own victory party that wasn't even for me. I stood in the kitchen, still holding my diploma folder, my crooked nursing pin catching the light, and I wanted to laugh and cry and throw a spatula all at once. Instead, I did something worse. I walked upstairs, changed out of my uniform, hung it carefully in the closet where it wouldn't get dirty, and came back down to help with the trash. Because that's what you do when you're too tired to fight and too proud to give them the satisfaction of seeing you break. You take out the garbage, both literal and metaphorical, and you start planning your exit strategy. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating like it was trying to escape from my nightstand. I'd gone to bed around midnight after finally getting the kids settled down from their sugar-fueled barbecue rampage, and I'd managed maybe 4 hours of sleep before my phone decided to become the world's most aggressive alarm clock. I reached over, squinting at the screen through eyes that felt like they'd been rubbed with sandpaper, and saw a number that made my stomach drop. 27 unread messages. All from Patricia. All sent between 6:30 and 7:15 in the morning, because apparently the woman doesn't believe in normal human sleep schedules. I scrolled through them with growing disbelief, watching the messages escalate from mildly annoying to completely unhinged. The first few were typical Patricia. Short, demanding, with the kind of entitlement that comes from never being told no in her entire life. "Aaron, call me. Aaron, we need to talk. Aaron, this is important." Then they started getting more specific and somehow more infuriating. "Why didn't you pick up last night? We were calling you for hours. We needed you and you just disappeared." I sat up in bed, rubbing my face, trying to process this alternate reality where I was somehow the villain for not being available during the party I wasn't supposed to be at in the first place. Mira was still asleep next to me, curled up under the comforter like she didn't have a care in the world, which I guess she didn't because in her universe, missing your husband's graduation was just a minor scheduling conflict, like double booking a hair appointment. I was about to put my phone down and maybe reconsider my life choices when it rang. Patricia, of course. I stared at her name flashing on the screen and seriously debated letting it go to voicemail, but I knew that would just result in another 27 messages and possibly a welfare check from the police because this woman was nothing if not persistent. "Hello," I answered, trying to sound more awake than I felt. Finally, Patricia's voice came through the speaker like a bullhorn. "Aaron, where were you last night? We were trying to reach you for hours. The meat delivery guy showed up late, and we needed someone to handle it. And you were just gone." I blinked, trying to process what she'd just said. I was upstairs, in my house, the house where I live, the house where the party you threw without telling me was happening. "Don't be dramatic," she said, using that tone she reserves for when she's about to make something my fault. "We needed you to help with the delivery. The man was very rude about payment, and we had to sort it out ourselves." "You had to sort out payment," I repeated slowly. "For a party I didn't know about, celebrating nothing related to me, while I was upstairs recovering from attending my own graduation ceremony alone." There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing on the other end like she was physically restraining herself from lecturing me about respect or family values or whatever topic she'd chosen for today's guilt trip. Before she could respond, Mira stirred next to me, finally waking up from her peaceful slumber in a world where consequences didn't exist. She reached for her phone, scrolled for a second, then turned to me with this casual expression that made me want to throw my pillow across the room, like she was asking me to pass the salt. "The meat supplier said your card declined when we tried to pay for the ribs last night. Can you transfer more money to my account? We still owe them like $400. I stared at her. Just stared. My brain had officially short-circuited. "I'm sorry, what?" She sat up, pushing her hair back, looking mildly annoyed that I wasn't immediately jumping to solve this problem. "The ribs. For the barbecue. Your card declined, so we had to use Mom's card, but she needs to be reimbursed. Can you just transfer the money today?" "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice deadly calm. "You threw a barbecue instead of coming to my nursing school graduation ceremony, the ceremony marking the end of 4 years of work, and you charged it to my card." Mira shrugged, actually shrugged, like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. It's family, Aaron. We celebrate together. Everyone was there, my sisters, my cousins, even George from next door. It was important. George from next door. I repeated. George, who I've spoken to maybe 3 times in 2 years, was more important than my graduation. You're being dramatic again, she said, echoing her mother's favorite phrase. It was just one day. We can celebrate your nursing thing whenever. My nursing thing. 4 years of my life, reduced to a thing that could be rescheduled like a dentist appointment. Patricia's voice crackled through the phone, which I'd apparently forgotten I was still holding. Aaron, are you still there? About that payment. I put the phone on speaker because at this point, I needed both of them to hear what I was about to say. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly. You organized a barbecue, invited everyone except me, missed the most important academic achievement of my life, used my credit card to pay for it all, and now you're upset because I wasn't available to deal with your late meat delivery? Well, when you say it like that, you make it sound bad, Mira said, which might have been the most honest thing she'd said in months. It is bad, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. It's objectively, measurably, astronomically bad. I could publish a case study on how bad this is. Patricia jumped back in, because God forbid I have a conversation with my wife without her mother's input. Aaron, stop being dramatic. It's just food. Family is more important than some ceremony. We needed to bond, and you should be grateful to have such strong women in your life who know how to bring people together. Grateful. She wanted me to be grateful. Grateful for being excluded, financially exploited, and emotionally disregarded. I started laughing, which probably sounded unhinged because both Mira and Patricia went quiet. You know what? I said, still laughing. You're absolutely right. It's just food. Just like the Last Supper was just food. And we all know how well that turned out. One guy got betrayed. Everyone else pretended they didn't see it coming, and the whole thing ended with someone getting crucified. So yeah, totally just food. Nothing symbolic there at all. That's sacrilegious, Patricia said, offended. That's accurate, I corrected. Now, about this money transfer, it's not happening. The card declined because I set a limit after the last 3 family celebrations that somehow ended up costing me a month's salary. You want to throw parties? Great. Use your own money. Myra's face went from annoyed to genuinely shocked. Aaron, you can't be serious. We owe them money. Then pay them, I said simply. With money you earned from your job. You know, that thing people do to fund their lifestyle choices. I hung up on Patricia, who was mid-sentence about respect and obligation. Then I got out of bed, grabbed my work bag, and headed for the door. Behind me, Mira was calling my name, but I was done. Done with being the family ATM, done with being treated like my accomplishments were inconvenient scheduling conflicts, done with pretending this was normal. I had a 12-hour shift starting in an hour, and honestly, dealing with hospital emergencies sounded way more appealing than dealing with whatever this family crisis was becoming. At least at work, when people needed me, they said thank you. I made it exactly 6 days before the other shoe dropped, which in retrospect was actually pretty impressive considering my wife's track record of financial decision-making. I was in the middle of my shift at Johns Hopkins, helping Mrs. Chun get comfortable after her hip replacement surgery, when my phone started buzzing in my scrub pocket. I ignored it the first 3 times because, you know, I was actually doing my job. The job I'd spent 4 years training for that apparently nobody in my family thought was important enough to acknowledge. But the phone kept going off with that specific insistence that usually means either someone died or someone's about to ask you for money. And in my family, those were roughly equal emergencies. I excused myself, told Mrs. Chun I'd be right back with her pain medication, and stepped into the hallway to check my phone. The caller ID said First National Bank, which immediately made my blood pressure spike because banks don't call you with good news. Banks call you when something's wrong, when someone's committed fraud, or when you're about to learn an expensive lesson about trusting people with your financial information. Mr. Blake, the voice on the other end was professionally cheerful in that way customer service reps are trained to be, like they're about to tell you your house is on fire, but want you to stay calm about it. This is Jennifer from First National Bank's Fraud Prevention Department. We're calling to confirm a transaction that was flagged by our system as unusual activity. My stomach dropped. What kind of transaction? We have a transfer request for $6,200 from your checking account to an account listed as Myra's Events and Decor LLC. The transfer was initiated this morning at 9:47 a.m. We're calling to verify that you authorized this transaction. I stood there in the hospital hallway, nurses and doctors walking past me, and I swear I felt my soul leave my body for the second time in a week. $6,200. To an account I'd never heard of. For a business I definitely didn't know existed. I absolutely did not authorize that, I said, trying to keep my voice down even though I wanted to scream into the phone. Can you tell me where the request came from? Jennifer clicked some keys on her computer, and I could hear that specific sound of someone reading information they really wish they didn't have to share. The request was made through your online banking portal using your existing login credentials. The IP address matches previous logins from your home address, so our system initially processed it as legitimate. My home address, which meant someone in my house, and I had a pretty good idea who had used the login information I'd given Mira years ago when we were actually communicating like normal married people and she needed to transfer money for groceries or pay a bill. That login I'd given her back when I still believed we were a team, before I realized I was just the financial sponsor of her family's lifestyle choices. That login was supposed to be for emergencies, I said, more to myself than to Jennifer. Not for funding whatever entrepreneurial disaster my wife has decided to pursue this week. I'm sorry, sir, Jennifer said, and she actually sounded sympathetic, which made me think she'd probably dealt with this kind of domestic financial drama before. Would you like us to block this transaction? Yes. Block it, cancel it, light it on fire, whatever you need to do. And Jennifer? I need to change every password, every security question, every possible way someone could access my account. Can we do that right now? Absolutely, Mr. Blake. Let me put you through to our security department. I spent the next 20 minutes in a supply closet because that's where I ended up for privacy, changing every single password on every single account I had. Bank accounts, credit cards, student loan portals, even my Netflix password because at this point I didn't trust anyone in that house not to binge watch shows on my dime and somehow charge me for it. The security guy, whose name was Marcus and who definitely understood the assignment, helped me set up two-factor authentication, security alerts, and basically turn my financial accounts into Fort Knox. Just out of curiosity, Marcus said as we were finishing up, "Do you need to authorize anyone else on these accounts?" "A spouse, maybe." I laughed, and it came out darker than I intended. "Marcus, my man, the person I'd need to authorize is the same person I'm protecting these accounts from. So no. Just me. Only me. Forever and always, just me." "Understood, sir. You're all set. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" "Yeah," I said. "You got any advice for a guy who just realized he's been living with financial vampires disguised as family?" Marcus paused, and I could hear him smiling through the phone. "Document everything, Mr. Blake. And maybe talk to a lawyer." I hung up and sat there in the supply closet for a minute, surrounded by boxes of surgical gloves and medical tape, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Anger was too hot, too immediate. This was colder, more calculated. This was the moment when you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else has been playing chess, and you're about to flip the whole board over. I pulled out my laptop, thank God for hospital Wi-Fi, and logged into my router settings from work. Changed the Wi-Fi password to something nobody in that house would ever guess. Graduation day, 2025, never forget. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? You have no idea. Then I went through and changed every streaming service password, every shared account, everything that had my credit card attached to it. Hulu, Disney Plus, Spotify, Amazon Prime. If it had a login, I changed it. If it had my payment information, I removed it. My phone started blowing up almost immediately. First Mira. "Why isn't the Wi-Fi working?" Then her sister Jessica. "Did you change the Netflix password?" I'm literally in the middle of a show. Then Patricia, because of course. "Aaron, the internet is down and I'm trying to order supplies for the business. Fix it immediately." The business. Myra's Events and Decor. The business I was apparently supposed to fund without being asked, consulted, or even informed it existed. I pulled up Google and did a quick search, and sure enough, there it was, a barely functioning website with stock photos of parties and a tagline that said, "Making your events extraordinary." The About Us section featured a paragraph about a family of passionate women bringing culinary excellence and event mastery to your special occasions. There was even a photo gallery, and I recognized our backyard in at least 3 of the pictures. So let me get this straight. They'd been using my house, my money, and apparently my identity as the financial backer for a business I knew nothing about, all while treating my actual accomplishments like they were minor inconveniences in their social calendar. I sat there staring at that website, at those pictures of parties I'd either been excluded from or forced to work at, and something in me just snapped. Not in a violent way. I'm a nurse. I've been trained to stay calm in actual emergencies. This was more like a switch flipping, a decision being made at a cellular level. I was done being the family ATM with legs. Done being the supportive husband who gets taken for granted. Done pretending this was normal. I renamed my Wi-Fi network one more time, just for good measure. Access_night_forever. Then I went back to work, back to Mrs. Chun and her hip replacement, back to a job where people actually appreciated when I showed up and did my job well. At least at the hospital, when someone needed my help, they didn't try to rob me blind while I was giving it. The moment I froze their access to everything, and I mean everything, from the bank accounts to the HBO Max subscription, my phone transformed into a digital war zone. I'm talking full-scale assault, the kind of message bombardment that would make a telemarketer look subtle. It started around 2 in the afternoon, right when I was helping Mr. Rodriguez with his post-surgical breathing exercises, and by the time I checked my phone during my break, I had 63 unread messages, 17 missed calls, and what I can only describe as a manifesto of entitlement spread across multiple text threads. Mira led the charge with a series of messages that escalated from confused to angry to full-blown apocalyptic in the span of about 15 minutes. Why would you do this? Came first, like she genuinely couldn't comprehend why someone might be upset about attempted financial fraud. Then, Aaron, this is childish. We need to talk like adults, which was rich coming from someone who tried to steal $6,000 without asking. My personal favorite was, "You're embarrassing me in front of my family," because apparently my reaction to being robbed was the embarrassing part, not the actual robbery itself. Jessica jumped in next with her trademark dramatic flair, sending me a voice memo, an actual voice memo, like we were living in 2015, where she went on for 3 solid minutes about how I was tearing the family apart and destroying the sisterhood they'd built. The sisterhood, like they were a sorority and I was some rival frat trying to shut down their mixer. She ended with, "Mom is literally crying right now because of you," which was supposed to make me feel guilty, but honestly just made me wonder if Patricia had ever cried about anything I'd actually accomplished. Speaking of Patricia, she held off for about an hour before unleashing what I can only call the mother-in-law manifesto. It started with a phone call that I declined, followed by a text that said, "Answer your phone." Now, when I didn't comply, because I was busy actually doing my job, nursing people back to health, she sent a message that was legitimately 7 paragraphs long. 7 paragraphs about respect, family values, traditional gender roles, and something about how her generation knew how to sacrifice for family. The irony of her lecturing me about sacrifice while simultaneously trying to steal my money was apparently lost on her. The best part? She ended with, "You should be grateful to have such strong, capable women in your life who know how to run a business and support each other. Not every man is lucky enough to marry into a family like ours." I read that line 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from the hospital coffee, which is entirely possible because that stuff could probably strip paint. Grateful. She wanted me to be grateful for being treated like a walking wallet, for having my achievements ignored, for being the financial foundation of a business I didn't know existed. The audacity was almost impressive in a deeply disturbing way. But here's the thing about reaching your breaking point. Once you're there, all the guilt trips and manipulation tactics that used to work just kind of bounce off you like you're wearing emotional Kevlar. So I did something I'd never done before in 6 years of marriage and countless family drama episodes. I muted them. All of them. Mira, Patricia, Jessica, even Jessica's husband Tom, who sent me one message saying, "Bro, just apologize, it's easier." Which, thanks Tom, really helpful advice from the guy who lets his wife spend his entire paycheck on scented candles. I went into my phone settings and systematically muted every single person in that family. Not blocked. I'm not a monster, just muted. Their messages would still come through. I just wouldn't get notifications. They could scream into the void all they wanted, and I'd check it whenever I felt like it, which based on my current emotional state would be approximately never. The silence that followed was absolutely golden. And I mean that literally. It felt like someone had given me a gift wrapped in peace and quiet with a bow made of actual sanity. My phone stopped buzzing every 30 seconds. My Apple Watch stopped having a seizure on my wrist. I could actually focus on work without being interrupted by the latest installment of Why Aaron is the Worst Person Ever, a family drama in 17 acts. I threw myself into work with the kind of intensity usually reserved for people training for the Olympics or trying to forget their problems through productivity. I picked up extra shifts, volunteered for the overnight rotations that nobody wanted, and basically became the nurse who was always available because my home life had become less appealing than dealing with hospital emergencies at 3 in the morning. At least when someone coded in the ICU, there was a clear protocol to follow. There's no protocol for my wife tried to embezzle $6,000 for her catering business. That's when I really started noticing the people at work. Not just as colleagues, but as actual human beings who treated me like a person instead of a checking account. There was Maria, one of the senior nurses, who brought homemade empanadas every Friday and always saved me one even though I never asked. There was Jake, an ER tech who had the kind of dark humor that only comes from years of seeing humanity at its worst and deciding to laugh about it anyway. And then there was Dr. Lynn Nguyen, the attending physician who'd been at Hopkins for 15 years and had a reputation for being brilliant, no nonsense, and occasionally terrifying. I'd interacted with Dr. Lynn plenty of times before. She was the kind of doctor who remembered everyone's names and actually listened when you reported patient concerns, but we'd never really talked beyond professional stuff. That changed one Thursday evening during a rare quiet moment at the nurse's station. I was charting notes, probably looking as exhausted as I felt, when she sat down next to me with her coffee that was definitely cold by then because doctors never get to drink hot coffee. "Blake," she said, not looking up from her tablet, "you've been picking up a lot of shifts lately. Everything okay?" I almost gave her the standard, "Yeah, just need the money" response, but something about the way she asked, genuinely curious, not prying, made me pause. "Just going through some family stuff," I said, which was the understatement of the century. She nodded, still reviewing whatever chart she was working on. Family stuff is usually the worst stuff. Work emergencies are easy. Someone stops breathing, you fix it. Family, that's complicated. She finally looked up at me, and there was this knowing look in her eyes like she'd been through some version of this herself. "Hey, congrats on the pin, by the way." I just stared at her. "What? Your nursing pin? From graduation. I saw it on your uniform last week. Johns Hopkins, right? That's a solid program. Congrats." It took me a second to process what she'd just said, because it was the first time, the actual first time since the ceremony, that anyone had acknowledged my graduation. 6 days. It had been 6 whole days, and the first person to say congratulations was a doctor I barely knew beyond our professional interactions. "Thank you," I managed, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. "That actually means a lot." Dr. Lynn smiled, this small knowing smile that made me think she understood exactly what I wasn't saying. "You earned it. For years of nursing school, while working? That's not easy. You should be proud." And just like that, standing in that hospital hallway at 7 in the evening, exhausted and emotionally drained and probably overdue for a mental health day, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the barbecue incident. Recognized. Seen. Valued. "Thanks, Dr. Lynn," I said. "Really." She stood up, grabbed her cold coffee, and headed back toward the patient rooms. "Keep up the good work, Blake. And hey, whatever that family stuff is, don't let it make you forget what you accomplished." I sat there for a minute after she left, just staring at my phone, which was still blissfully silent, and thinking about how messed up it was that a colleague I'd known for a few months had shown me more support than my wife and her entire family combined. That night, I checked my muted messages. There were 42 new ones. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I opened my schedule and signed up for 3 more shifts next week. Turns out the silent treatment goes both ways. And I was winning. 6 months. That's how long I'd been living in what I can only describe as glorious, peaceful silence. 6 months of picking up shifts, making actual friends at work, and discovering that life without constant financial ambushes and emotional manipulation was actually pretty damn nice. I'd moved into a small apartment closer to the hospital. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with functional air conditioning and neighbors who didn't try to steal my money. And I'd honestly started to think maybe this was how things were going to stay. Clean break, fresh start, all that self-help book nonsense that actually seemed to be working. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Mira, and I knew the universe wasn't done screwing with me yet. Come home for dinner tonight. The family misses you. I stared at that message for a solid 10 minutes, sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot after my shift, trying to decode what fresh hell this invitation could possibly mean. The family misses you. The same family that had spent the last 6 months sending me increasingly unhinged messages about how I was selfish, ungrateful, and single-handedly destroying their entrepreneurial dreams. The same family that had literally chosen a barbecue over my graduation and then tried to steal $6,000 from me. That family missed me. Sure. And I'm the Queen of England. My first instinct was to delete the message and pretend I never saw it, which had been my strategy for the past half year, and honestly, it had been working great. But something about the tone felt different. Not aggressive, not demanding, just simple and direct. Almost normal, which was suspicious as hell because nothing about that family had ever been normal. I sat there debating with myself like some kind of psychological thriller protagonist, deciding whether to walk into the obvious trap. On one hand, I'd built a pretty solid life without them. My apartment was quiet, my bank account was actually growing instead of mysteriously depleting, and I discovered I really enjoyed cooking for one because nobody criticized my portion sizes or suggested I should have bought more expensive ingredients. On the other hand, I was curious. Morbidly, unhealthily curious about what could possibly prompt Mira to reach out after 6 months of radio silence. Also, and I'm not proud of this, but part of me wanted to see if they'd actually acknowledge what they'd done. Maybe offer an apology? Show some growth. Demonstrate even the tiniest shred of self-awareness about how badly they'd screwed up? Yeah, I know. I said I wasn't proud of it. Curiosity won. I texted back, "What time?" The response came immediately, like she'd been waiting by her phone, 7 p.m. Nothing fancy, just family dinner. Nothing fancy, just family dinner. Those 4 words should have been my first warning sign. Because when has anything with that family ever been nothing fancy or just anything? But apparently 6 months of peace had made me soft, or maybe I'd just been working too many overnight shifts and my judgment was impaired from chronic exhaustion. Either way, I found myself driving to my old house at 6:45, mentally preparing for whatever psychological warfare awaited me. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up was that the lawn was mowed. Actually mowed, with clean edges and everything, not the overgrown jungle it had been last time I drove by 3 months ago to grab some mail. Someone had pressure washed the driveway. There were new flower pots on the porch, those expensive ceramic ones from that boutique place downtown that Mira always wanted, but I said were too pricey. The house looked like it had been featured in a home and garden magazine, or like someone was trying to sell it, or like they were setting up the world's most elaborate ambush. I parked on the street instead of in the driveway, leaving myself an easy exit route because I've learned a few things about tactical retreat over the years. As I walked up to the front door, I noticed the doorbell had been replaced, one of those fancy video ones that probably cost $200. I rang it anyway, because showing up unannounced to your own former house felt weird even in this situation. Mira answered immediately, and I had to do a double take because she looked different. Not different like she'd changed as a person, let's not get crazy, but different like she'd actually made an effort. Hair done professionally, makeup applied with actual skill instead of the usual 5-minute rush job. Wearing that blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary 3 years ago that she said made her look fat, but I thought made her look beautiful. She was smiling, but it was that specific smile people wear when they're nervous and trying to hide it. "Aaron," she said, like my name was a complete sentence. "Come in. Everyone's here." Everyone. Great. I stepped inside and immediately understood why the outside looked so pristine. They'd applied the same treatment to the interior. The living room was spotless, like someone had actually read the instructions on the vacuum cleaner. The dining table was set with our wedding china, the stuff we only used for Thanksgiving and that one time her boss came over for dinner. There were candles, real candles, not the cheap grocery store ones, and cloth napkins folded into those fancy shapes that require YouTube tutorials. The smell hit me next, Actual home-cooked food. Not just any food, but my favorites. I could identify pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, and unless my nose was lying, someone had made my mom's recipe for green bean casserole, the one I'd taught Mira how to make during our first year of marriage when we were still pretending we were going to be one of those couples who cooked together. Patricia emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron that said, "World's Best Mom," which felt like propaganda, but I kept my mouth shut. She was carrying a serving dish and actually smiled at me. Not the fake smile she used when she wanted something, but what looked like an attempt at genuine warmth. "Erin, so glad you could make it. Dinner's almost ready." Jessica and her husband Tom were sitting on the couch, and Jessica actually waved instead of immediately launching into some dramatic monologue. Tom gave me a nod that seemed almost apologetic, which was the most personality I'd ever seen from the guy. Then I noticed George. George from next door, sitting in my old armchair like he belonged there, holding a beer and grinning at me with that dopey expression he always wore when he'd wandered into a situation he didn't fully understand. "Hey, Erin," George called out, raising his beer. "Great to see you, buddy. Quite the spread they've got going here." I just stood there in the doorway, taking in this entire scene. The pristine house, the fancy dinner, the suspiciously pleasant attitudes, and George the neighbor who I'd spoken to maybe 5 times in 2 years now apparently part of the family dinner. Everything about this screamed setup. This wasn't a casual family dinner. This was a production, a carefully staged performance designed to accomplish something. Nobody in that family cooked a 3-course meal with wedding china and decorative napkins unless they had an agenda. Nobody pressure-washed the driveway and bought expensive flower pots just because they missed someone. Mira touched my arm gently, her smile still in place. "Come sit down. We have a lot to catch up on." I looked at her, then at Patricia in the kitchen, then at the elaborate dinner setup, then back at Mira. "What's going on?" "Nothing," she said too quickly. "Can a family just have dinner together?" "Sure," I said, walking toward the dining room but staying alert. Families do that all the time, usually without staging it like a Broadway production. But hey, what do I know? I sat down at the table, and everyone started gathering around, passing dishes and making small talk like we were the freaking Brady Bunch and the last 6 months hadn't happened. George kept grinning like he'd won the lottery just by being invited to dinner. Something was definitely up. And knowing this family, I was about to find out exactly how expensive their agenda was going to be. Dinner started innocently enough, if you could call anything involving Patricia innocent. We passed dishes around the table like we were filming a commercial for Family Values. Everyone smiling and making safe conversation about the weather, traffic, and other topics that didn't involve theft or abandonment. George was telling some long story about his new lawn mower that absolutely nobody cared about, but we all nodded along because apparently that's what we were doing now, pretending everything was normal. I took a bite of the pot roast, and damn it, it was actually good. Like, legitimately delicious, cooked perfectly with that fall-apart tenderness that takes hours to achieve. Someone had put in real effort here, which made me even more suspicious because effort from this family usually came with a price tag attached. The mashed potatoes were creamy, the green bean casserole tasted exactly like my mom's recipe, and even the dinner rolls were those fancy ones from the bakery that cost $8 for a half dozen. Mira kept refilling my water glass, asking if I wanted more of this or that, and being attentive in a way she hadn't been since approximately 2019. Jessica was actually asking me questions about work, genuine questions, not the usual, "That's nice, honey" responses she'd give before immediately changing the subject to something about her social media following. Even Patricia was being weirdly pleasant, complimenting me on how healthy I looked, and saying she'd heard wonderful things about my work at the hospital from someone she knew who knew someone. It was all very Stepford Wives, and I was waiting for someone to crack and reveal the robot underneath. We made it through the main course and halfway through dessert, homemade apple pie with vanilla ice cream, because of course they'd gone all out, before the other shoe finally dropped. I'd been counting down in my head, actually taking bets with myself about when the real reason for this dinner would emerge. I'd guessed right after dessert was served. I was off by about 5 minutes. Mira cleared her throat in that specific way people do when they're about to say something rehearsed. She glanced at Patricia, who gave her this little encouraging nod, and I swear I saw Jessica pull out her phone to either record this or live tweet it. I couldn't tell which. "So, Erin," Mira started, setting down her fork and folding her hands on the table like she was in a business meeting. Honey, Mom and I have been working on something really exciting these past few months. Something that could really change things for our family. Here we go. I thought, taking another bite of pie, because if I was going to sit through a pitch for whatever disaster they'd cooked up, I was at least going to enjoy the food. We're starting a catering business. Patricia jumped in, unable to contain her enthusiasm. It's called Flame Queens. We've been planning it for months, developing recipes, researching the market, building our brand identity. We've even got a logo designed. Jessica held up her phone, showing me what looked like a logo designed in Microsoft Paint by someone who'd had 3 margaritas and access to clip art. It featured flames and a crown and what might have been a spatula or possibly a scepter. I honestly couldn't tell. That's something, I said diplomatically, which in Aaron speak meant, that's absolutely terrible, but I'm trying not to start a fight before I hear the whole pitch. We've done our research, Mira continued, pulling out an actual folder, a physical folder with printed documents, which meant they'd put some effort into this presentation. The catering industry in Baltimore is booming. There's huge demand for authentic, family-style cooking at events. We've already got interest from 3 potential clients who saw our Instagram posts. 3 whole clients, I said, nodding. That's definitely enough to base an entire business on. I'm sure no market research or business planning is necessary beyond Instagram likes. Patricia shot me a look but maintained her smile. We know it's a risk, Aaron, but all businesses start somewhere. Your skepticism is noted, but we really believe in this. Great, I said. I'm happy for you. Really. Following your dreams, taking chances, all that inspirational poster stuff. So what's the timeline? When are you planning to launch? Mira exchanged another glance with her mother, and I knew we were approaching the actual point of this dinner. Well, that's the thing. We've got everything ready, the recipes tested, the business plan written, the social media presence established. We just need a little seed money to get started. For equipment, initial inventory, licensing fees, that sort of thing. How much is a little? I asked, though I already knew this was going to be bad. Patricia leaned forward, putting on what I assumed she thought was her serious businesswoman face. $50,000. That's our initial investment need. It sounds like a lot, but when you break down the costs, professional-grade equipment, a commercial kitchen rental, insurance, marketing budget, initial ingredient inventory, it's actually quite reasonable. I actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a full genuine laugh that made George look uncomfortable and Jessica stop recording. $50,000? That's not seed money. That's an entire garden, including the land, the fence, and probably a greenhouse with those fancy automatic watering systems. Aaron, please don't be dismissive, Mira said, her pleasant facade starting to crack slightly. This is serious. We've put a lot of work into this. I'm sure you have, I said, setting down my fork because I'd suddenly lost my appetite. But let me make sure I understand this correctly. You want me, the guy whose graduation you skipped for a barbecue, who you tried to steal $6,000 from, who you haven't spoken to in 6 months except to send angry messages about how terrible I am, to give you $50,000 for a catering business based on 3 Instagram inquiries and a logo that looks like it was designed during a power outage. You're being dramatic again, Patricia said, using her favorite phrase like it was a magic spell that would make me compliant. I'm being realistic, I corrected. Do you have a business plan? And I mean a real one, not just we like to cook and people like our food. Do you have financial projections? Operating costs? Break-even analysis? Any understanding of what it takes to run an actual business? Mira pulled out more papers from her folder, spreading them on the table. We have all of that. Look, we've projected that we'll break even within 18 months and start turning a profit by year 2. The catering market in Baltimore generates over $40 million annually. We only need to capture a tiny percentage of that market to be successful. I glanced at the papers, which were covered in numbers that looked impressive until you realized they were based on absolutely nothing. And where exactly are these projections coming from? What data are you using? Industry averages, Patricia said confidently. Jessica researched it online. Jessica researched it online, I repeated slowly. Jessica, who once asked me if Alaska was a state or a country, did the financial research for a $50,000 business venture. Hey, Jessica protested. I was confused because it's so far away from the other states. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on that had nothing to do with the wine I'd carefully avoided drinking. Let me put this in perspective for you. I'm a nurse. A nurse at a good hospital, yes, but still a nurse. You know what nurses make. Good money, decent money, but we're not exactly rolling in spare $50,000 investments. I've got student loans, lots of them. I've got rent. I've got living expenses. And I'm trying to save for a future that doesn't involve funding other people's entrepreneurial fantasies. You're doing great, though, Mira said, like she'd been keeping tabs on my finances, which was creepy. You're working all those extra shifts. You must have savings. I do have savings, I admitted. Savings that I earned by working 12-hour shifts, overnight rotations, and holidays while you all were having family barbecues without me. Savings that are for my future, not for flame queens or whatever the next disaster is going to be called. George, who'd been quietly eating his pie this whole time, suddenly spoke up. I think it sounds like a good opportunity, Aaron. These ladies can really cook. I mean, this pot roast. Outstanding. I turned to look at George, this man who'd somehow become a character in my family drama despite having zero stake in anything. George, buddy, with all due respect, and I mean this genuinely, this has nothing to do with you. You're literally just the neighbor who got invited to dinner. I might invest, George said, which explained why he was here. They were auditioning backup investors in case I said no. George, you work at Jiffy Lube, and you've told me 3 times that you're behind on your mortgage. Where exactly are you going to get investment capital? He shrugged. Could take out a loan. Please don't do that, I said, feeling genuinely concerned for this idiot. George, go home. Enjoy your lawnmower. Don't get involved in this. Patricia stood up, her patience apparently exhausted. Aaron, this is a real opportunity. We're not asking for a handout. We're offering you a partnership. You'd get equity in the business. Returns on your investment. This could be huge for all of us. I stood up too, grabbing my jacket from the back of the chair. You know what? I'm going to make this really simple. The answer is no. Hard no. Not 50,000, not 5,000, not $50. When you all start a business that doesn't involve burning my wallet or requiring me to fund your dreams while you ignore my accomplishments, let me know. Until then, enjoy your Flame Queen's fantasy, and maybe try asking a bank for a business loan like normal entrepreneurs do. Banks require credit checks and business plans, Jessica muttered. Exactly, I said, pointing at her. That should tell you something. I headed for the door, and Mira followed me. Aaron, wait. Can't we at least talk about this? I turned to look at her. This woman I'd married 6 years ago when we were both different people with different dreams. Mira, you missed my graduation for a barbecue. You tried to steal money from me. And now you want me to fund your business after 6 months of silence? No, we can't talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. I walked out, got in my car, and drove away, watching that perfect house with its perfect lawn get smaller in my rearview mirror. Best $50,000 I never spent. A few weeks went by, and I settled back into my peaceful routine of work, sleep, and not being financially exploited by my in-laws. I'd almost forgotten about the Flame Queen's pitch. Almost being the key word, because you can't completely erase the memory of your wife asking for 50 grand over pot roast when I started hearing rumors. Not from Mira or her family directly, because we'd gone back to our mutual silent treatment arrangement, but through the grapevine. And by grapevine, I mean George the neighbor, who apparently couldn't keep his mouth shut if his life depended on it. I ran into him at the gas station on a Tuesday morning before my shift. He was filling up his truck and saw me at the next pump, and his face immediately did that thing where people know something you don't, and they're dying to tell you, but they're pretending they're not going to tell you, which means they're definitely going to tell you. Hey, Aaron, he said, walking over with that same dopey grin. Heard about the business thing. Tough break, man. I looked up from the pump, genuinely confused. What business thing? George's face shifted to surprise, like he'd just realized he was about to be the bearer of bad news. Oh, you don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. George, you've already started. Finish the sentence. He scratched his head, looking uncomfortable. Well, I heard from my wife who heard from Jessica's Instagram stories that Flame Queens kind of imploded. Like, spectacularly. They took out a loan using the house as collateral. Your old house, I mean. And apparently the whole thing went sideways real fast. My blood went cold. They used the house as collateral? Yeah, man. Something like $30,000. They bought all this fancy equipment, rented a commercial kitchen space, spent a ton on marketing and Instagram ads. But then they only booked like 2 actual events, and both of them were disasters. Something about undercooked chicken at a wedding and a birthday party where they forgot half the food. I just stood there with the gas pump in my hand, watching the numbers tick up, trying to process this information. They'd actually done it. They'd actually taken out a massive loan, bet the house on their half-baked business plan, and crashed harder than the Hindenburg. How bad is it? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. George winced. From what I heard, pretty bad. The business folded after 3 months. They're behind on the loan payments. Banks apparently threatening foreclosure proceedings. Jessica's been posting vague stuff about financial hardship and asking for donations to her Venmo. Of course she is, I muttered, finishing up at the pump and putting the nozzle back. Thanks for the heads up, George. No problem, man. Hey, for what it's worth, you were right to say no. That whole thing was a disaster waiting to happen. I drove to work in a daze, part of me feeling vindicated and part of me feeling something uncomfortably close to guilt. Not guilt for saying no. I stood by that decision completely, but guilt for the kids. Emma and Tyler were living in that house. If the bank foreclosed, where would they go? They didn't choose to have a mom who made catastrophic financial decisions. The inevitable call came during my lunch break. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, eating a sad sandwich and scrolling through my phone, when I saw Patricia's name flash on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but morbid curiosity got the better of me. Aaron. Her voice sounded wrecked, like she'd been crying or screaming or possibly both. We need to talk. I'm listening. It's all gone. The business, the money, everything. The bank is threatening to take the house. We're going to lose everything, and this is your fault. I actually laughed, which probably wasn't the right response, but come on. My fault. Patricia, I explicitly told you not to do this. I said no. You went ahead and did it anyway, and now you're blaming me? You should have helped us. You should have invested when we asked. If you'd been a supportive husband and son-in-law, none of this would have happened. We could have made it work with proper funding. You got $30,000, I said, keeping my voice level. You got a loan from a bank, bought equipment, rented space. You had funding. What you didn't have was a viable business model, realistic expectations, or apparently the ability to cook chicken to safe temperatures. How dare you? No, Patricia. How dare you? How dare you call me after months of silence, after trying to steal from me, after missing every important moment in my life, and tell me this is my fault? You made your choices. You rolled the dice on Flame Queens. You lost. That's not on me. We're family. Family doesn't treat each other like ATMs, I said. Family shows up for graduations. Family doesn't commit fraud. Ma'am, the only thing I'm guilty of is trusting people who confused love with free catering and financial support. She started to respond, but I hung up. Just hung up, blocked her number, and went back to eating my sad sandwich. My phone buzzed with texts from Mira, from Jessica, probably from other family members I'd forgotten existed. I deleted them all without reading them and finished my lunch in peace. They'd made their bed. Now they could lie in it. Preferably in a bed they actually owned and hadn't used as collateral for a doomed catering venture. Work became my sanctuary, my church, the place where I actually mattered and people remembered I existed for reasons other than my bank account balance. I'd been pulling so many shifts that the hospital was basically my primary residence and my apartment was just that place I occasionally visited to shower and change scrubs. The other nurses started calling me the permanent resident, which was both a medical joke and an accurate assessment of my life choices. I didn't mind, honestly. At work, things made sense. Someone needed help, you helped them. Someone was in pain, you managed it. Someone coded, you ran the code. There was protocol, procedure, a clear chain of command. Nobody asked me for $50,000 between chest compressions or tried to steal my credit card information while I was administering medications. It was refreshingly transactional in the best possible way. I did my job well, people appreciated it, everyone went home. Well, patients went home. I just went to the next shift. I was at the nurse's station around 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday, charting notes for Mr. Patterson, who'd just had his gallbladder removed and was convinced the surgery had given him psychic powers, which happens more often than you'd think with anesthesia, when Dr. Lin appeared next to me with 2 cups of coffee. Real coffee, not the hospital sludge that could probably clean engines, but actual Starbucks with my name spelled completely wrong on the cup. Blake, she said, handing me the cup that said Aaron on it. Got a minute? For coffee that doesn't taste like despair? I've got 5 minutes. She smiled and gestured toward the small conference room we used for family meetings and occasionally for staff to hide from particularly difficult patients. We sat down at the table, and I noticed she had that look on her face. The one doctors get when they're about to say something important, but they're trying to figure out how to phrase it so you don't panic. So, she started, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. I've been wanting to talk to you about something. Your performance here has been exceptional, and I don't say that lightly. I've worked with a lot of nurses over the years, and you've got something special. I took a sip of coffee, waiting for the other shoe to drop, because compliments in my life were usually followed by requests for money or explanations of why I was somehow the villain. Your patients adore you, Dr. Lin continued. I've had at least 6 different people specifically request you for their care. Mrs. Chen still talks about you every time she comes in for follow-ups. Mr. Rodriguez sent a letter to the hospital board praising your bedside manner. That almost never happens. They're good patients, I said, deflecting because I genuinely didn't know how to accept compliments anymore without analyzing them for hidden agendas. They're regular patients with a really good nurse, she corrected. Which brings me to why I wanted to talk to you. You're being considered for the Excellence in Nursing Award. It's given out annually to one nurse who exemplifies outstanding patient care, professionalism, and dedication to the field. The committee reviews nominations, patient feedback, peer recommendations, the whole thing. And Aaron, you're a strong candidate. I just stared at her, coffee cup halfway to my mouth, brain trying to process what she'd just said. I'm sorry, what? The Excellence in Nursing Award, she repeated, smiling at my reaction. It comes with a plaque, recognition at the annual hospital gala, and a $5,000 bonus. But more importantly, it's genuine recognition of your work. You've earned this consideration. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of my life had reached new heights. You mean the award for people whose wives throw parties without them and then try to start failed catering businesses? Dr. Lin's expression shifted to something softer, more understanding. No, the one for people who survive chaos and still show up. The one for people who could have let their personal disasters destroy their professional performance, but didn't. The one for nurses who remember that their patients matter even when everything else in their life is falling apart. That hit me. Actually hit me somewhere in my chest that I'd been keeping carefully protected since the barbecue incident. I set down my coffee cup because my hands were suddenly not as steady as they should be. For once, Dr. Lin said quietly, someone's seeing you, not as a wallet, not as backup, not as a supporting character in someone else's drama, as a person who's really good at their job and deserves to be recognized for it. I sat there for a moment, staring at this coffee cup with the wrong name on it, and I realized something. This was the first time in months, maybe years, that someone had acknowledged my worth without immediately following it up with a request. No, you're doing great. So can you loan me money? No, we're proud of you. Now come help with this thing that has nothing to do with you. Just pure, uncomplicated recognition. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say you'll keep doing what you're doing, Dr. Lin said, standing up. The committee makes their decision in about 3 weeks. But between you and me, I'm on that committee, and you've got my vote. She left, and I sat there in that conference room, holding my incorrectly labeled coffee, and I felt something I hadn't felt since before my graduation ceremony. Hope. Not the naive kind that gets you hurt, but the realistic kind that comes from understanding your own value. My phone buzzed with another text from someone in Myra's family. Probably another crisis, another disaster, another plea for help that would somehow become my fault. I didn't even look at it. For the first time in a long time, I had something that was actually mine. Recognition I'd earned, respect I'd built, and a future that didn't depend on anyone's approval except my own. And that felt better than any $50,000 investment in a doomed catering business ever could. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing backstage at the Johns Hopkins Hospital annual gala, wearing a suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion because I'd decided that if I was going to receive an award, I wasn't going to do it in wrinkled khakis and a tie I'd borrowed from someone's lost and found. The suit was navy blue, actually fit me properly, and made me look like someone who had their life together, which was hilarious because my life was still a controlled disaster, just a disaster I was now managing on my own terms. The gala was being held in the hospital's main conference center, which they'd transformed into something that actually looked elegant instead of like a place where people usually attended mandatory sexual harassment training seminars. There were round tables with white tablecloths, centerpieces that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a stage with actual professional lighting. The room was packed with doctors, nurses, administrators, hospital board members, and various other people who'd achieved things and were here to celebrate each other instead of skipping out for barbecues. I was nervous, like, genuinely, palms sweating, heart racing nervous in a way I hadn't been since my final nursing boards. This was different though. The boards were about proving I knew enough to not accidentally kill someone through incompetence. This was about being seen, being valued, being recognized for actually doing something well. And after the year I'd had, the graduation no-show, the financial theft attempts, the catastrophic business venture I'd wisely avoided, the idea of standing in front of people who actually appreciated my work felt weirdly vulnerable. Dr. Lin found me backstage, looking elegant in a black dress that probably cost more than my suit, but she wore it like it was just clothes. "You ready, Blake?" she asked, and there was genuine warmth in her voice that made me relax slightly. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. "Is it too late to fake a medical emergency and get out of this?" She laughed. "You're a nurse. You'd have to fake it really convincingly, and everyone here would know exactly what you were doing. Besides, you've earned this. Go accept your award and let people clap for you. It's not that scary. Easy for you to say. You probably get awards all the time. I've gotten 3 in 15 years, she said, and I was terrified each time. But here's the thing. This isn't about being comfortable. It's about letting people recognize your value. Something tells me you haven't had much of that lately." She was right, of course. The past year had been a masterclass in being undervalued, overlooked, and financially exploited. Standing on a stage and accepting recognition felt almost foreign, like I was playing a character in someone else's story instead of living my own life. The program started, and I sat in the designated area for award recipients, watching as they went through various presentations and recognitions. There was an award for research excellence, one for administrative innovation, something about community outreach that I honestly zoned out for because I was too busy trying not to throw up from nerves. Finally, they got to the nursing awards, and I heard Dr. Lin take the stage as the presenter. "The Excellence in Nursing Award," she began, her voice clear and professional through the microphone, "recognizes a nurse who demonstrates exceptional patient care, unwavering dedication, and the kind of compassion that reminds us why we chose this profession in the first place. This year's recipient has gone above and beyond in every measurable way. His patients consistently praise his attentiveness, his ability to make them feel heard and cared for during their most vulnerable moments, and his skill in managing complex medical situations with both competence and kindness." I realized she was talking about me, and my brain kind of short-circuited for a second. Those were real things she was saying about actual work I'd done, not just generic award speech filler. "He's picked up extra shifts when we were short-staffed," Dr. Lin continued, "mentored new nurses with patience and expertise, and maintained a level of professionalism that sets the standard for our entire department. In a year where he faced significant personal challenges," she paused, and I saw her glance toward where I was sitting. "He never let those challenges affect the quality of care he provided to his patients. That kind of dedication is rare and deserves to be celebrated." She looked directly at me. "Aaron Blake, would you please join me on stage?" The applause started, and I stood up on legs that felt like they'd forgotten how to work properly. I walked toward the stage, and the sound of all those people clapping, actually clapping for me, for work I'd done, for value I'd created, felt surreal. I climbed the steps, shook Dr. Lin's hand, and accepted the plaque she handed me. It was heavy, made of wood and brass, with my name engraved on it and the words "Excellence in Nursing Award" in fancy script that probably required a special font license. I stood at the microphone, looking out at this room full of colleagues and strangers, and I had a moment of absolute clarity. These people were here. They'd shown up. They were clapping not because they wanted something from me, not because they were obligated to, but because they genuinely appreciated the work I'd done. It was such a simple thing, but after the year I'd had, it felt revolutionary. "Thank you." I started, my voice sounding more stable than I felt. I honestly didn't prepare a speech because part of me didn't believe this was actually happening, which probably says more about my self-esteem issues than I should admit in front of hospital administration. But here we are. A few people laughed, which helped me relax slightly. I became a nurse because I wanted to help people. I continued, finding my footing. That's the cliché answer everyone gives, but it's true. I wanted to do something that mattered, something that made a tangible difference in people's lives during their worst days. And this past year has tested that commitment in ways I didn't expect. Not because of the work, which I love, but because of everything happening outside of work that made me question whether anything I was doing actually mattered to anyone. I paused, looking down at the plaque in my hands. But then patients like Mrs. Chun would thank me for explaining her medication schedule in a way that made sense. Or Mr. Rodriguez would specifically request me for his follow-up appointments because he felt comfortable asking me questions. Or families would stop me in the hallway to say that having a nurse who actually listened made their loved one's hospital stay less terrifying. And I realized that matching doesn't require the approval of people who should care about you. It just requires showing up and doing the work with people who need you. The room was quiet now, people actually listening instead of just politely waiting for me to finish so they could applaud and move on to the next award. So this award means more to me than you probably realize, I said. Not just because of the recognition, though I'm incredibly grateful for that, but because it's proof that showing up matters, that doing your job well matters, that maintaining your integrity and professional standards even when your personal life is a dumpster fire actually means something to people. I looked over at Dr. Lin, who was smiling with what looked like genuine pride. Thank you to Dr. Nguyen for nominating me and for being the first person to congratulate me on my nursing school graduation, even though it was 6 days late. Thank you to my colleagues who cover shifts with me, who laugh at my terrible hospital humor, and who remind me daily why this profession is worth the sacrifice. And thank you to my patients, who trust me with their care and make every shift meaningful. The applause started again, louder this time, and I walked off the stage with my plaque held carefully in both hands like it might disappear if I didn't hold it tight enough. People stopped me as I made my way back to my seat. Colleagues offering congratulations, handshakes, genuine warmth that I'd been starving for without even realizing it. After the ceremony ended and we moved into the reception portion of the evening, I found a quiet corner with my plaque and a glass of champagne that someone had handed me. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the messages I'd been ignoring for weeks. More texts from Myra's family about the foreclosure proceedings, about how I should help because it's the right thing to do, about how I was destroying the family by refusing to save them from their own decisions. I thought about that barbecue, about seeing those Instagram photos of matching aprons and grills while I sat alone at my graduation ceremony. I thought about the 125 missed calls, the attempted theft, the $50,000 pitch over pot roast. I thought about every moment over the past year where I'd been treated like a supporting character in someone else's story, valued only for what I could provide rather than who I actually was. And then I thought about standing on that stage tonight, holding this award, hearing people applaud for work I'd actually done. I thought about Dr. Lin saying, "Someone's seeing you as a person who's really good at their job." I thought about Mrs. Chin's thank you cards and Mr. Rodriguez's letter to the hospital board and all the small moments over the past months where I'd been reminded that my value wasn't determined by people who'd chosen to ignore it. I took a photo of my plaque and posted it to my Instagram, my first post in over a year. The caption was simple: Excellence in Nursing Award. Sometimes showing up is its own reward. Within minutes, comments started rolling in from colleagues, from nursing school classmates I hadn't talked to in years, from people who actually cared about my achievements. Nowhere in those comments did anyone suggest I should have used the award ceremony as an opportunity to fund someone's failed business venture or apologize for having boundaries. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it automatically, but something made me check it. It was George, the neighbor. Saw your award on Instagram. Congrats, man. That's really cool. Also, I didn't invest in Flame Queens. Talked to my wife after you told me not to, and she said you were right. Anyway, proud of you, buddy. I smiled, typing back a quick thanks. At least George had learned something from this mess. I looked around the reception, at people networking, laughing, celebrating each other's successes, and I realized something fundamental had shifted in me over the past year. I'd gone from desperately seeking approval from people who would never give it to understanding that the only approval I really needed was my own, and the recognition that came from people who actually saw my value. If Mira and her family hadn't skipped my nursing school graduation, I might still be chasing their approval, still funding their disasters, still believing that family meant sacrificing your own worth to support people who would never do the same for you. In a twisted way, that barbecue had been the best thing that could have happened to me, not because it felt good, because it absolutely didn't, but because it forced me to see the situation clearly for what it was. Family isn't who shows up to eat your food and spend your money. Family is who claps for your wins, who celebrates your achievements, who values you for who you are rather than what you can provide. And if the people you thought were family can't do that, then they're just people you happen to be related to, and you're allowed to build your own family from the people who actually show up. I finished my champagne, carefully packed my award in its presentation box, and headed out to my car. Tomorrow I had an early shift, and Mrs. Patterson was scheduled for discharge planning, which she'd probably turn into a 3-hour therapy session about her conspiracy theories regarding hospital food. But that was okay. That was my job, and I was apparently excellent at it. As I drove home, to my small apartment with its functional air conditioning and its lack of people trying to steal from me, I passed by my old house. The lights were on, and I could see shadows moving around inside. Part of me wondered how they were dealing with everything, if they'd managed to avoid foreclosure, if they'd learned anything from the Flame Queen's disaster. But mostly, I just kept driving. They'd made their choices. They'd rolled the dice on Instagram likes and designer aprons and the assumption that I'd always be there to bail them out. They'd lost, and I'd won, not by getting revenge or proving them wrong, but by simply building a life where my value wasn't up for debate, where my achievements were celebrated, and where the only grill I had to worry about was the occasional hospital barbecue fundraiser where nobody tried to charge me $6,000 for ribs. So here's what I learned from the day the grill won. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the push you needed to stop accepting less than you deserve. Sometimes being excluded from the party is better than being invited just to work it. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well, doing good work, and letting people who actually appreciate you throw you a proper celebration. Family isn't who eats your food, it's who claps for your wins. And if your wife ever chooses ribs over your success, let her. Just make sure you're the one who gets the last laugh, preferably with a promotion, a prestigious award, and way better barbecue elsewhere.